Good morning and welcome to Ginner Park United Methodist Church. I am Lee Walker, the lay leader here, and I would like to invite you to the call of worship. Can you hear the voice of God? We hear God calling us by name. Are you troubled or distressed? We come here to find a place to rest for a while. Come and find a guide who knows these lands. We come to praise our shepherding God, whose pathways and doors lead to life.
I remember the day you found me. I was incomplete. My hope was lost and fading fast. Searching could not find a beat. Then all of a sudden I felt out of nowhere a rushing mighty wave. It changed my heart, renewed my mind, and now I have peace within. I'm gonna lift your name on high. Your presence I cannot deny. Tell everybody if I could, 'cause I know, Lord, you've been so good. I'm gonna lift your name on high. Your presence I cannot deny. Tell everybody if I could, 'cause I know, Lord, you've been so good. Ever since the day you placed me, I haven't been the same. Although I've had many ups and downs, your love for me has never changed. It's brand new life that I have in you. It's been the open door, the peace of joy and happiness, and victory is so much more. I'm gonna lift your name on high. Your presence I cannot deny. I'll tell everybody if I could, 'cause I know, Lord, you've been so good. But I'm gonna lift your name on high. Your presence I cannot deny. Tell everybody if I could, 'cause I know, Lord, you've been so good. Lord, you've been good. Like no one else could. You're more than like to me. My everything. I'm gonna lift your name on high. Your presence I cannot deny. I'll tell everybody if I could, 'cause I know, Lord, you've been so good. I'm gonna lift your name on high. Your presence I cannot deny. I'll tell everybody if I could, 'cause I know, Lord, you've been so good. Lord, you've been good. You've been so good to me. Like no one else could. You're more than like you.
Today's lesson is from John chapter 21, verses 15 to 19. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my lambs." The second time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Tend my sheep." He said to him the third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter felt hurt because he said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep." Very truly, I tell you that when you were younger, you used to fasten your own belt to go wherever you wished. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will fasten a belt around you and take you where you do not wish to go. He said this to indicate the kind of death by which he would glorify God. After this, he said to him, "Follow me." This is the gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ.
Good morning. It's good to see all of you. As one who is very passionate about angling, I felt it appropriate to use the opportunity this morning to share a sermon by Bishop William H. Willimon, who wrote on the third Sunday after Easter in 219 a sermon titled "Fishing, Failure, and a Future." And he does a wonderful job of highlighting the Gospel of John, chapter 21, verses 1 through 19. Now, I have always tried to adhere to my 3 F's in life, and that is faith, family, and fishing. And this is why this sermon kind of was relevant to me and kind of hit home. Let me give you just a background real quick of Mr. Willimon, Bishop Willimon. He is a retired American theologian and bishop in the United Methodist Church who served in the North Alabama Conference for 8 years. He is a professor of the practice of Christian ministry and director of the Doctor of Ministry program at Duke Divinity School. And he is also a former dean of the chapel of Duke University and is considered by many to be one of America's best known and most influential preachers. So in Bishop Willimon's words, this is this morning's sermon. Late in life, I got into fishing. I had always had a bit of a contempt for fishermen. I've got better things to do with my valuable time than to sit on the bank waiting for some creature with the brain the size of a pea to make my day. I don't have the patience for it, at fishing that is, and I've said as I've refused invitations from friends to go with them out on a lake to go with them fishing. Well, on my 60th birthday, I decided to get my first fly rod. Perhaps taking up fishing at 60 is a way, ought to do it, and when one slows down a little bit, it's a good time. And there's more time for the sport that requires lots of time of sitting and waiting around for a fish to bite. Well, to my surprise, I really loved fishing. There was a lot to learn, and I enjoyed learning things. I even got a rig and started tying my own flies. And I found it to be true, as someone said, that trout live in the most beautiful places in the world. And I couldn't agree more to his words. I began planning my travel schedule on the basis of opportunities for stepping into some unfamiliar mountain streams or wading into some marsh in order to go after fish. But the thing that most impresses one about fly fishing, and the aspect of the sport that stays with you no matter how long you practice it, is failure. You got it, failure. You go out first thing in the morning, haul out all of your gear, full of hope and expectation. You use good form of casting, you present the fly just right, you work from a well-stocked box of fly patterns, and yet as the sun goes down that evening, you have very little to show for it. Well, I'm embarrassed to admit, but once I even traveled all the way out to Montana, hired a rental car, drove to a very remote location, hired a guide, and expected to take me out in the outback where I was surely going to be successful. I spent 2 days, 2 full days of fishing, and caught one pitiful trout. If you're going to be a fisherman, you better be good at failure. Funny, I heard very much the same statement from my bishop when I began a pastoral ministry. Our bishop addressed us young pastors and said, "I can assure you, if you have any visions for a church, if you have any high expectations of yourself and your ministry, then you better be very good at handling failure." It's a rather odd message to hear when we walk through the great 50 days of joy that the church calls Eastertide. We are presented in the days just after Easter a gospel lesson that is full of failure. And Easter is a joyful victory of God, not that sad defeat. And yet the defeat permeates this Sunday's gospel. The gospel means good news, and yet our story today is full of bad news and failure. With this Sunday's gospel lesson, we come to the very end of the Gospel of John. Failure permeates every aspect of this story. First of all, there is an apparent or assumed failure of Jesus and his mission. The walk with Jesus ended terribly. The disciples have trudged back to what they were doing before Jesus Christ called them to be his disciples. They are fishing. Maybe they didn't know what to do with themselves, and after standing by and watching Jesus, humility crucified on Friday and decide, it's over. Back on the road as the Jesus movement gained momentum, they had hopes that he was indeed the anointed one, the Messiah, who had redeemed Israel. But Jesus had failed. You can't fight City Hall. The people turned against us. The Romans, they had all the arms. There's nothing left for us to do but to go back and go fishing. Maybe you think it odd that John had given us the accounts of the risen Christ appearing to the disciples when they were behind locked doors, found in John 20. He has spoken to them, even appeared to them, and their collective response, they have gone back to fishing. You must be really dull person to walk away from a resurrection, to have been personally met by the risen Christ and still go back to fishing. But honestly, now, as we sit here a few Sundays after that grand celebration of the resurrection, are we much different than the disciples? And yet, their fishing did not go much better than their discipleship. A group of disciples have been fishing all night, and they haven't caught a single fish. Their empty nets must have seemed like a symbol for just how they felt. Failure, defeated. Peter led the disciples, is among the group, and Peter personally embodied their collective failure. But in the upper room, Peter had promised to remain steadfast and stand with Jesus, even when things were going really rough. You know how long that lasted. Peter ended up denying Jesus 3 times and breaking down in tears at the failure of his resolve. Note that when Peter denied Jesus in the courtyard in the middle of the night, when the maid had questioned him, Peter was so much denying Jesus as denying that he himself was a disciple. And to be sure, with his repeated denials, he certainly didn't act much like a disciple. But now, here at the end, Jesus comes to Peter, seeks him out, and recalls him. Even as Peter denied Jesus 3 times, Jesus calls on Peter 3 times. He calls him to love him, and then he commissions him and giving him an assignment of feeding his beloved sheep. In spite of Peter's past failure, Jesus puts Peter in charge of his flock, asking him to attend, to feed, and to keep the sheep in his pasture. Peter denied Jesus 3 times in the dark twilight of that Friday. Now 3 times Jesus asked Peter, "Do you love me?" And 3 times Peter answered in the affirmative, "Yes, yes, yes, I love you." I don't think Jesus is so much quizzing Peter as repeating his question in order to reassure him. When he asked, "Do you love me?" Jesus seems confident that the answer is yes. Though Peter has disappointed himself and his Lord and failed being the perfect disciple, nevertheless, his love for Jesus is assured love. Just because you dearly love Jesus doesn't mean that you'll never disappoint yourself or disappoint Jesus. Yet, the important thing is that Jesus returns to Peter, engages him, commissions him. Our gospel lesson concludes with a curious prediction of Peter's death. One day, the one who had once denied the Lord, and then the one who was given and recalled to be a disciple by his Lord, would eventually die for his Lord. Peter, the failure, the one who was charged by Jesus with tending the sheep, who were failures themselves, would succeed as a martyr, as a witness to Christ. Peter would prove, in the end, completely steadfast and faithful to Jesus' invitation. Follow me. Eastertide with Jesus, the days after the resurrection, is not simply a moving with Jesus into eternity and not primarily taking Jesus and talking to us in the eternity. Easter concludes with those ringing words in our ears, "Follow me." I think there's a lesson here in this account of Jesus breakfasting with the disciples on the beach. Sorry if you thought Easter and the risen Christ meant Jesus has thereby erased all of the discouragements, frustrations, and failures in the world, and even from our lives. Still, even after Easter, even after the resurrection of the Christ comes and stands right in front of us, it's still possible to misunderstand, to fall away, to allow the everydayness of life, the dull, the reassuring routine, to overcome our joy at the miracle of Easter. And yet, the good news is that Jesus does not let us be. He comes to us as we are. He seeks us out amid the dull, numbing routine of everyday life. There he speaks to us, reassures us, and once again, he calls to us. Follow me. Follow me. Jesus will not let us walk away from him or his resurrection, shrugging our shoulders and going back to our everyday boring routine of life. He comes to us. The risen Christ appears. He not only appears to us, but he also calls to us. He assigns us his work to do. Feed my sheep. could be interpreted in a number of ways. I think that's how Christian vocation is. What we expect you to do varies with each of us, and each of us is here under His invitation and His command. Follow me. I hope that in your times of failure, when you aren't followers of Jesus that you intended to be, when believing in Jesus is difficult for you, or when you are disappointed by the results of your labors, or facing some failure in your own life or ministry, that you will remember the story of this post-Easter and take heart. Our failure does not negate His vocation. Even in our failures to follow, He keeps showing us and changing our ordinary lives. He keeps encouraging us and keeps saying to us, even us, you and me, follow me. Amen.